Right now on Currents News, back in Rome after a historic trip to Iraq. The Pope says he's already planning his next trip.
Toccare la Chiesa, toccare il santo popolo di Dio, toccare tutti I popoli.
Calls for fraternity. That was the mission, unity between Christians and Muslims. The pontiff receiving a lot of support from Iraqis. And in the rubble, on the site of a bombed-out church, comes Pope Francis's biggest plea, asking those in attendance to forgive ISIS and to hold on to courage, never giving up. We break down the Pope's trip right now. Some of the last moments in the land of Abraham, music and celebration on the streets of Iraq before Pope Francis headed home. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti, and you are watching New York's Pope Station. The first papal trip to Iraq is now in the books. During his press conference this morning, the Pope says he's feeling revived, having gotten out of the Vatican for the first time in more than a year. Emily Druby is here with more. Emily.
Christine, Pope Francis spoke with reporters on the plane ride home. It gave us insight as to what the Holy Father was thinking and feeling during his trip. He spoke about human fraternity and his crucial meeting with the highest-ranking Shiite leader of Iraq. He addressed fears of spreading COVID on the trip and even mentioned which country he could visit next. Pope Francis grateful for his historic trip to Iraq, saying being with the people was like coming back to life after months in prison.
Un prete si fa prete per servire.
A priest becomes a priest to serve God's people.
On the way home, he addressed outside concerns raised about the trip spreading COVID.
Ho pregato tanto su questo.
I prayed a lot about this trip, and in the end, I made the decision freely, though it did come from within.
He's the first pope to set foot in the country, a crucial step towards human fraternity, the aim of interreligious dialogue. Something so important to Pope Francis, he says he's willing to take risks for it. On Saturday, the pontiff traveled to Najaf to meet with Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, the country's most senior Shiite religious cleric. The private meeting, a milestone in relations between the Catholic Church and Shiite Islam. Pope Francis continued his quest for peace at an interreligious meeting in said to be the birthplace of Abraham, the meeting bringing hope to those who were there.
My friends, they are Muslims, they are Christian. We not differ between each other. So we hope the visit of the Papa will stick us together.
The Holy Father ending the full day back in Baghdad, celebrating his first Mass with the area's Christian community. On Sunday, he was welcomed to Erbil by singing crowds, traveling also to Mosul, a city occupied and destroyed by ISIS for 3 years. Amid the ruins of so many churches, he prayed for their victims.
La fraternità è più forte del fratricidio.
Fraternity is stronger than fratricide. Hope is more powerful than death. Peace is more powerful than war.
The Pope also traveled to QARAQOSH, meeting with the Christian community at a church once used as a firing range. After seeing the martyred cities, the Pope went back to Erbil to celebrate Holy Mass, greeted by 10,000 participants, including the father of a 3-year-old Syrian child, warning this image is difficult to see. This photo of his lifeless body washed up in Turkey. It sent shockwaves through the world. He serves as a heart-wrenching reminder of the thousands of refugees who have died looking for safety and a better life in Europe. During Mass, Pope Francis once more shared his hope for interreligious dialogue.
I ask all of you, dear brothers and sisters, to work together in unity for a future of peace and prosperity that leaves no one behind and discriminates against no one.
Now, while on the papal plane, Pope Francis confirmed a September trip to Hungary for a Mass, but he won't tour the country. He's also now considering a journey to Lebanon, too. Christine?
Thank you, Emily. Catholic leaders in Iraq are praising the Pope's trip to the country. Cardinal Louis Sacco is calling the trip a miracle, telling reporters, quote, The situation has changed already. Everyone is talking about us now, about the history of Christians in Iraq and the Middle East, saying the land was theirs. We arrived later, using a completely different language of respect toward Christians, encouraging Christians to stay, to build trust. We have had a reporter on the ground in Iraq throughout the Pope's trip. Inez San Martin, Rome bureau chief at Crux, is back home in Rome and joins us now to give us a wrap-up of the weekend. And Inez, welcome back. It was quite a trip. So before we get to the papal presser, I want to give you the chance to just give us a brief recap of this weekend through your eyes.
It was really moving. It had very concrete, different elements to it, starting with Pope Francis having this beautiful meeting with Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, who's the head of the Shia Islam in Iraq. Then we saw on Sunday, Pope Francis going to Mosul and then going to QARAQOSH, two cities that were devastated by the Islamic State terrorists. It was incredibly moving to see both of those days, but to me, I'll always cherish on Sunday the mass for 10,000 people in a stadium in Erbil, because most of those people, all of them obviously Christians, but they are internally displaced people who fled ISIS during the worst of the fighting in 2014, and to see them joyful and actually having that palpable sensation that the Pope remembered them and the world remembers Christians in Iraq was to me very, very special.
The Holy Father, who's 84 years old, admitted that the trip was tiring. Let's listen to what he said.
Non so se i viaggi si rallenteranno o no. Solo vi confesso che in questo viaggio mi sono stancato molto di più che negli altri.
But he also said after COVID lockdowns, the trip revived him. Tell us about that.
It was very funny because I've been traveling with this man for almost 7 years. I've been exhausted at the end of every single one of those trips. And when he said today, I have to confess that I actually got tired this trip. I'm like, only this time you were tired? Like, seriously, I'm still trying to recover from our tour in Japan and Thailand, and you're tired now? That was definitely funny, and it was a good moment of, okay, we all let loose on the plane when we were coming back because everyone was tired.
Yeah.
We're all tired all of the time when we're on the road with the Pope. And regarding what he said of relentare, the trip, will the trip slow down? I'm not a betting person, but my money is on the fact that as soon as COVID allows, he's going to go back to this crazy touring schedule.
And I was going to say that because he doesn't stop. There was some mention of future trips.
Yes, there were actually. He's already promised. He's already, he's out in the open saying, I'm going to go to Hungary to the closing of the Eucharistic Congress. He was very specific, and this is definitely interesting and something worth analyzing. He said, it's not going to be a visit to Hungary, but to Budapest to take part on to close the Eucharistic Congress. And then he also mentioned he wants to go to Lebanon. Much like John Paul II has said, Lebanon is the message when it comes to coexistence, and it's definitely a key trip for Pope Francis if he wants to insist on making sure that there is Christianity in the Middle East, 10, 50, 100 years from now.
Wow. All right. Inez San Martin, Rome bureau chief at Crux. Thanks so much for keeping us informed throughout this weekend.
No, thank you, Kristen.
Many Christians who left Iraq to escape ISIS never returned, but those who came back are taking the Pope's advice and forgiving their persecutors.
We are sons of God, and he forgives us every day, and this is what we have learned from him, to love, because he loved.
As we've mentioned, Pope Francis spent a lot of time urging Iraqi Christians to forgive the terror caused by Islamic extremists. He emphasized transforming Iraq into a place of peace and coexistence. And that's exactly what Christians in QARAQOSH are trying to do. ISIS vandalized churches and defaced symbols of Christianity in the town. And while much of the damage has been repaired, the wounds that ISIS left behind are still there. ISIS was here. And here, and here. Their reign of madness in the mostly Christian town of QARAQOSH ended more than 4 years ago. Services have resumed at the Church of the Immaculate Conception. Rituals conducted for centuries, once again part of the rhythm of daily life. Almost all of the town's inhabitants fled before the onslaught of ISIS. The joy of return clouded by the shock at what was left of their homes.
You can't imagine, says Imam Abdallah. It was empty, destroyed. They left nothing.
Father AMMAR YAKO says he worries decades of trauma have left a deep, still raw wound.
Iraq is in a dark tunnel, he says. There are challenges caused by wars, by the terrorism still present in some areas, by economic problems, and by the corruption so widespread in Iraq.
Johanna Saker's 2 daughters gave up and left, one to Sweden, the other to Australia. He hopes Pope Francis's visit will spark a change of hearts and minds.
Maybe there will be love and peace, Johanna tells me. Maybe it will soften and melt frozen hearts.
And when Pope Francis was at that church on Sunday, he pointed out that the gathering of the community shows that terrorism and death never have the last word. He also returned the so-called refugee book. The historic manuscript was a silent witness to ISIS's destruction of the Immaculate Conception Church. It was found in 2017 and sent to Italy, where it underwent a restoration process. Pope Francis held a prayer service in the church after returning the book. And coming up in just a little while on New York's Pope Station, the Diocese of Brooklyn's Monsignor Kieran Harrington. He spent time in the small Christian communities of Iraq. He's also the ecclesiastical assistant of Aid to the Church in Need. He has seen the destruction in Iraq firsthand and will join us with what we can do to help. Today is International Women's Day, and to mark it, we are profiling one of the highest-ranking women in the Catholic Church today. And women are thanking Pope Francis for his commitment to promoting female employees of the Vatican.
There are now some big changes to the tablet website. You can get personalized access to the Catholic news you value. Sign up for free at thetablet.org.
Back to our big story tonight. Pope Francis is now resting after what is being called his most symbolic trip ever to the land of Abraham, where he blessed some of the oldest and most persecuted Christian populations in the world. The Diocese of Brooklyn's Monsignor Kieran Harrington, ecclesiastical assistant to Aid to the Church in Need, has spent time in Mosul, Erbil, and Tel Aviv. I asked him what he thinks this papal trip meant to the people there.
Well, clearly, the people of Iraq have endured a great hardship for 20 years, the last 20 years where they've been at war, but also then the Christians have suffered as a result of the insurgency, the ISIS insurgency, Islamic fundamentalism, the disillusionment of the government.
There were so many moving moments from this trip. At a mass in Mosul, Pope Francis expressed hope that the struggling Christian minority will hang on, saying, when Christians leave, it does incalculable harm. What do you think about that?
It's a very difficult thing to ask people to stay in a country that has been ravaged by war and there is enormous hostility, and particularly people in Mosul who've experienced the burning of their churches, their homes, the murder and killings. But Christians act as a leaven. Why do I say that? Well, because with Christian communities, there is the building up of a civil society. There is a notion of common good, which is a little different than the tribalism which is so prevalent among the Islamic communities.
You know, some people in Iraq say they're already seeing a shift in the country, but there are many Christians still there that are still fearful. And then there are Christians who have fled who don't want to come back. So do you think the Pope's trip can change that? And what else is needed?
So what has really happened is many of the Christians who lived in Baghdad have moved north. So Erbil is really the Kurdish region. And as you know, the country is divided into very different regions. But in Erbil is really in the beginning of the Kurdish region. There were some tensions between, and I was there actually when there were some tensions between the Iraqi government and the provincial government, the Kurds. A lot of the Christians have moved north towards the Kurdish region. My sense of speaking to people is that they are very much afraid. Many would like to leave. The reason why they don't leave is they can't leave. The idea of going to a UN refugee camp and being in a refugee camp for maybe 10 years, and then finally getting to the West, whether Europe, the United States, maybe Australia, it's just too difficult.
As Christians who live in first world countries, what can we do to support these populations in Iraq?
Well, the first thing that they would ask you to do is to pray for them. The second thing is to be generous to them, because it is very difficult in terms of work. It's very challenging to provide for all the social service needs. I mean, when you consider the great ravages of war, what are the impacts of the ravages of war? You have alcoholism, you have violence in the domestic situation, you have depression, you have PTSD. I mean, these are all conditions that have to be treated. And even after the war is over and there is this sense of peace, that doesn't mean that the terror has gone away. So to be financially contributing to their success. And the last thing is to be advocates. You know, we in our relative peace have to be advocates for our brothers and sisters in the Middle East. How is it that we can stand as agents for the Christian community and the advocates for them in terms of our own governmental policy is very, very important.
And that was Monsignor Kieran Harrington, Ecclesiastical Assistant Aid to the Church in Need. You can help Christians in Iraq by making a donation at churchinneed.org. If you missed any moment of the trip, you can catch up on all of our exclusive coverage on the Currents News and tablet websites. Just click on the Pope in Iraq tab. There are dozens of videos and countless articles that cannot be missed. Monday marks International Women's Day, and 15 ambassadors to the Holy See made a video thanking Pope Francis for giving women a bigger role in the church.
As female ambassadors, we are so pleased that Pope Francis is appointing so many capable women to the Vatican.
In the video, representatives emphasize the Pope's commitment to promoting girls' education and his efforts to address human trafficking. And in Brooklyn, one woman is holding a top spot in the diocese. Jessica Easthope has that story from Windsor Terrace.
Pope Francis has taken more steps toward inclusion of women than any other pope in history. His commitment has flowed down from the Vatican all the way to Brooklyn.
Pope Francis has definitely paved the way. He's refreshing with his ideas and his approach.
That's all right now. Jasmine Salazar is representing women of faith as the Diocese of Brooklyn's first ever layperson and Latina to be named Vice Chancellor.
It's always been a dream of mine to incorporate my faith with my profession. And so when the opportunity came to be able to do that over here in the Diocese of Brooklyn, I was like, this is what I always wanted to do.
I'm so sorry to hear that. In her role, Jasmine solves problems for anyone who calls on her and gives a voice to those who need it most as victim assistance coordinator for the diocese.
We fall back on our faith when anything happens in our lives, but that is taken away from someone that's been abused. We have to rectify that.
Jasmine's all-women team is the support system she needs to succeed. For them, she's an inspiration.
She sets the tone for many of us women who would like to follow her path. She holds everything together and is the rock of this place.
At one point, Jasmine never thought a full life and career was possible. Of her many titles, the one she's most proud of is Mama Bear.
Being a single mom, this is not something that I thought I would ever be welcomed. And quite honestly, I had a couple of things in my background that I felt, ruled me out.
Jasmine says to be the first is an honor, but she makes the most impact by being someone others can relate to.
She's my pride and joy.
A woman who has overcome adversity through faith.
I would tell that single mom that there's no limit to what you can do.
While women everywhere are still carving their own paths to be the first, Jasmine is opening her own doors. In Windsor Terrace, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Here are some more headlines. Catholic churches and schools in Texas are still requiring masks despite the state dropping the mandate. This, as the CDC says, people who are fully vaccinated can meet with each other and not wear masks. Jury selection in the case of the officer seen with his knee on George Floyd's neck has been delayed. And New York Republicans have announced an impeachment resolution against Governor Andrew Cuomo. Still to come right here on Currents News, 70 years later, the remains of an Army chaplain are identified, bringing closure to his family. And it was a whirlwind trip for the Pope over the weekend. We have another look at his journey after the break, right here on New York's Pope Station. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The remains of a well-known Army chaplain have been identified 70 years after his death. Captain Emil Capon died in a North Korean prisoner of war camp. He was interred in Hawaii before a push to identify unknown soldiers. He served as a chaplain in World War II and the Korean War. His family has not yet decided where he will be buried. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Please enjoy these clips from the Holy Father's historic trip to Iraq over the weekend. Hope to see you again next time.